Okay, let me share my Word document. Now, the other thing I want to share too is I am a Mac user, so some of the instructions that I provide today might not. Um, am I just sharing my Word document or
Yes,
am I sharing my whole screen? It doesn't usually the little green lights up around the document, but it's not doing that.
it's just the Word document.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, as I said, I am a Mac user, so my ribbon might look different to you as I'm going through some of these instructions, or as I am providing the instructions in the document here that I'm showing as an example. It might be a little bit different for you if you're a PC user. So just keep that in mind. It's not, um, I think you'll still be able to follow along. So this is just a document. It has all kinds of instructions in it. It's not accessible. Um, we're going to walk through it step by step, highlighting the most important things that you need to consider when you are planning to save your document as a PDF, or even if you're just planning to upload an actual Word document to your website. We're going to walk through all the different steps. So, um, couple of tips to start off with. Turn on your accessibility assistant, and this is light blue for a reason. It's a color contrast issue I'm going to highlight later, but turn on the accessibility assistant while you are working. This will help identify anything that might be not correct as you're working on your document. And so for me, how I do that in the um, top ribbon of the Word document, I will select the review tab. And underneath the review tab, there is an option to select check accessibility. So I'm going to do that. And what that does is it opens the accessibility assistant on the right-hand panel of my screen. And right out of the gate, you can see the information is organized under different headers: color and contrast, media and illustrations, tables, document structure, and document access. And there's already a couple of numbers listed under hard to read text, contrast, missing alt text, use of merged or split cells. It's not identifying any issues for the document structure, which is incorrect because there's actually no heading structure at all in this document. So even though there's a check mark there, it's not correct because I have not applied any headers to this document. So just keep that in mind. This is a really helpful tool to keep open while you're working. Another tip, try to avoid serif fonts like Times New Roman whenever you can. It used to be like the go-to. Obviously, if you're doing, a journal or a publication of some sort and you're submitting something to a journal and they have specific text requirements, you want to follow what those requirements are. But in general, best practice is to not use serif fonts. It can be hard to read for some users. The other tip I want to point out before we get started is it's important to try and avoid using all caps outside of necessary acronyms. Some screen readers will read all caps letter by letter as opposed to reading the word. So that can cause an issue for some users. Try and use a minimum of a 12-point font for readability. Also, it's not best practice to underline text for emphasis. There are other things that you should do: bolded, italics, using a different style or heading structure sometimes is more appropriate. Underlined text should be reserved only for links. Um, Otherwise, it can cause confusion for some users. So keep that in mind. Also, one of the other key elements I want to point out is you cannot create an accessible form using Microsoft Word only. So if you are creating a form using Microsoft Word and uploading it to your site, it's not accessible. There is not a way to make it fully accessible without using additional software like Adobe. So also keep that in mind. We are not going to focus on forms today. That's an entirely different training. We are just going to focus on a regular document that doesn't have any of those form fields today. And then the other tip is stay away from using text boxes. If you are planning especially to save this document as a PDF, it causes issues with accessibility in the conversion. It's really difficult to make it accessible when you insert text boxes into your Word document. It used to work if you did put it in line with the text, but that no longer seems to work when making your document accessible as a PDF. So We're going to go ahead and get started with, I'm just going to kind of go through this document because it really provides the instructions as we go through it, and then we're going to make this document accessible as we work through it. So the first thing to do is to make sure you save your document with a descriptive file name. How many times do we see documents uploaded to a website that just say document with no description of what that document might be? So best practice is to keep it under 30 characters if you can. Um, for this, I've already saved this document as something with an accessible title. It's the 2026-04-21, How to Create Accessible Documents. So that's pretty descriptive and accurate of what this document is and what it's going to tell you. It is also possible if you want to see the file extension. So for example, this one is .docx. There's a way that you can turn that on in your settings. And if you are on a Mac using Word, you would select Word Preferences, File, or I'm sorry, Word Preferences, General, and then you would make sure to select Show File Extension, so that's checked. So I'm just going to show you where that is really quick. I would go to, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. We would go to Word, trying to move my little bar here, just one second. Preferences. Can you see that? Does preferences showing up on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. You would go to Word, Preferences, and then under General here, you would select, where is it? Show File Extensions would be checked here. And so then that would, if I have that checked, you don't have to turn that on, but sometimes people like to have that on. That's how you would accomplish that. So I'm going to get back out of here. And now we're going to, oh, how do I, what did I do here? There we go. Okay. The next thing you want to do, and this is really important for accessibility, it will always fail an accessibility check if you do not set your document properties, most especially the title of your document. When you save your document as a PDF, if it doesn't have that metadata attached to it, it will automatically fail the check in Adobe Acrobat when you run a check in Adobe. And so how you want to do that is you go to, in my, from File, and then I would select Properties, and then you have these different tabs available: General, Summary, Statistics, Content, and Custom. So under Summary, this is where I would give the document a title, how to make your document accessible. I'm going to, you don't have to fill in all of these, but it doesn't hurt to fill in all of the fields. I'm just going to add that the topic or the subject is accessibility. I am the author. If I wanted to give it a category or some keywords, I could do that as well, although not necessarily required. And then I'm going to select OK. And now because I've given it that title, when I do save this PDF, save this document as a PDF, that title should convert over. Beth, what is your question?
Yeah, so those document properties not being in there, where does that show up on the scorecard on the right?
It doesn't. So this is not necessarily built in. It's not going to be caught in the accessibility checker. And so what's important to note is that the accessibility assistant is a tool that you can use, but it's not going to catch everything. So in this training, I'm going to cover the additional elements that you need to think about and take care of in order to convert the document into an accessible PDF. And not everything's going to convert perfectly. They're two different softwares, so there will still need to be work that needs to be done in Adobe. And we'll talk about more about that next month during our PDF training. But yeah, not everything that is wrong with this document is going to show up under the accessibility assistant. So just keep
I think that that bears repeating in various crowds, because I hear faculty say, "Oh, the accessibility checker says it's fine, so let's move on."
Yeah, nope, not always. It's just a tool. It catches some of the issues that might cause a barrier. None of the accessibility checkers in any of the Microsoft products compare the issues found to any kind of guidelines. It only looks for potential barriers. And so there are other tools that we will talk about next month, one of them being the PAC checker, which is a free PDF checker that actually does take your document and compares it to the WCAG standards and the PDF Universal Accessibility Standard. So um, not everything is correct just because it says, but it's a good place to start, and that's what we want to focus on. You want to try and make sure that all of this looks good in your accessibility assistant. So, okay, moving on. Use styles to create heading. So this is really important. Oftentimes, when somebody is creating a document, they will manually change the style just by making it bold, maybe bumping up the text size just to get it to look the way that they want. The problem with that is it doesn't provide any structure to the document. Oftentimes, when somebody is using a screen reader or other assistive technology, they will pull up an outline of the document to help them navigate through the content. And what makes up that outline is the heading structure and the links and the list. So it's important to use these built-in styles that you will find up in your ribbon under the Home tab. A lot of times people say, well, I don't like the way they look. Well, they're all customizable. So you can change the look and then apply the look to that heading style. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning where I highlight, the title of this document. And I am going to, I don't like the red header 1 here, although I don't know why it's not applying that. I am going to change the size. Let's make it like 24 point and bolded. And I like the way that looks. So I am going to right click on the header 1 style. And then I have the option to update that heading 1 to match the selection, which I've selected. So if I select that, then now my header 1 style is set to look the way that I just set it to be. This right here, I'm going to leave it for now, this section, just because we're going to talk about color contrast a little bit later on. But just for demonstration purposes, this document is not necessarily organized in the way where I would put all of these headers in the order that I'm going to showcase. I'm really just trying to demonstrate how you would set your styles and use the built-in tools. So I'm going to make this a header 2. Let's just pretend that it's a header 2. Same for this section here. This wouldn't probably be how I would use my headers in this document, but that's how you would set the headers. The other thing that's important about headers is you can easily generate a table of contents based on the header styles and the header organization at the end of creating your document, which can be really beneficial for longer documents that have where a table of contents would make it easier to navigate the document. So next, I want to show you use styles to create headings. Okay, assistive technology cannot infer meaning from visual characteristics alone. And so that's what I meant by not giving it just a style, making it the size and the color and the bolded font that you want, and making sure that you give it an actual structure. And we just went through creating the look that you want and updating the header styles to be what you want them to be in the top ribbon. And so the other thing that you can do when you're working on your document is turn on what's called the navigation pane, so you can get outline view of your document as you're going through and updating the header style. So I'm going to go to view on my top ribbon here. And then I'm going to select, there's this little box next to navigation pane. If I turn that on, it's got several different views now on the left-hand side. One of them just shows the page view. It shows you I have 5 pages in this document. And then the bulleted list looking icon is the structure of my document. So this is showing that from Word to PDF is the top level heading. And then it has all of these header 2 levels that show up right below it. So for example, if I am to turn this inaccessible example into a header 3, then it's going to show up in my outline view. right underneath the built-in features. So this can give you a quick look at how somebody with assistive technology might navigate through this document using a heading structure. It can also help you to determine or make sure that you're using the right description for your headers. So that's another good tool to have on while you're working in your document. So I'm not going to completely go through. I'll just add a few more headers to this document just to continue to build the structure, and then we'll continue to go on. So in addition to using heading styles, it's also really important to use lists. So using the built-in list tools, which you'll find in your Home tab ribbon at the top. A lot of times people will create the look of a list by either using spacing or the tab key. And this causes an accessibility issue for somebody reading your content with a screen reader. What a screen reader will do is it will call out that it's a list of related items, and that's important when you have content that should be grouped together. So right on the middle of the screen, I have an inaccessible example where I have used the tab key to with a dash instead of using the built-in bulleted list feature. And you want to stay away from doing this. You can check your formatting while you're working. For me, in the Home tab at the very top, there's this little paragraph icon where I can show and hide where the paragraphs and the spaces and the tabs are. And that can give you an indication of where you might have some fixing to do. So I can see I've got tab here. This is just a bulleted list that with the included spacing that comes with the bulleted list. So I'm going to turn that back off. This example for the accessible example is where I have used the built-in list, and you can tell that it's using the built-in list by highlighting the content, and in the top ribbon of the home ribbon, you can see that the bulleted list icon is selected. So I've applied the bulleted list style to this. Again, these are things that you can set up to custom look the way that you want. I'm not going to get into how to do that, but you can change the formatting. You can define a new bullet. You can change the way the bullets look. You can do all kinds of things with the styling of it. And then at the very end, when you create all the styles that you like, you can save the document as a template that you can reuse every time you want to create something new. And then you won't have to recreate all of those styles. So that's another important thing that you can do that's a really big time saver. So the next thing to consider is using the built-in columns to organize your content. So if you're only using tabs and spaces, again, a screen reader might have a difficult time interpreting your content, and it might not be read in the proper order. So if you want to set a column structure for your page, that would be under page layout and then columns. And that's where you could set a 2 or a 3 paragraph column if you were wanting to organize your content in that manner. And so under page layout, where I think it's format. No, where am I? Page layout columns. Is it under here? Where did it go? Now I can't remember where it is.
You're not actually on the layout tab.
Oh, thank you, Beth. Yes, columns. Thank you. I need help sometimes. So this is where you would set 1, 2, or 3 columns, or if you wanted a left and a right, you can choose that layout. As opposed to my inaccessible example that I'm about to show you here. And I'm going to set these headers as we go through here. So my inaccessible example is right here. I'm going to highlight it. This is where if I turn on the paragraph tags, I can see that I typed this content and then tabbed over. So I used all of these manual tabs to make this content. But if I use the read aloud, it's going to read left to right. this is an example of using a tab to a screen reader will not read this content. It's going to go left to right. It's not going to read the content as intended. That's why it's important not to use tabbing to create a column look. Instead, you want to use, and you can tell when I highlight it, in the order that it's going to read this content here. This is using a column layout, and it will read it in the order intended. So just make sure if you're using this kind of formatting that you use the proper built-in tools for accessibility. Okay, next we're going to talk about tables. This is a big one. Tables, a lot of our faculty especially, or just people using, forms. We're so used to documents for gathering information and data from people and then having them email or mail them or scan and send them, using complex tables to lay out data. And it's really problematic for screen readers because complex tables are difficult to read because they have to maintain a relationship status between the data. So when we start using merged cells and split cells, then people using screen readers start to get confused with the relationship of the data below it if it's not properly labeled. So that's why we say simple tables. Use the insert table function in Word. Keep the data table simple. Identify the header row. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to highlight, I have a table here that's 3 columns and 3 rows. I'm going to select that entire table. And that, when I do that, in the top ribbon, it gives me a table design and a table layout option. So I can look at those options for that table specifically. And so when I select table design, I want to make sure over on the far left corner of the screen, there's an option to toggle on header row. And so when I turn that on or off, it doesn't change the look of the table, but it changes the function. So somebody with a screen reader, because this is now header row is selected, it will identify this fall header with the data below it. That's why that's important. Otherwise, it'll just read it as its own individual cell, not related to the data below it. So table headers are really important. Let's see. And the other thing, don't use tables to lay out images. So don't use it for layout. You only want to use it for data. There are other layout options available using columns or using other types of layout where you can change the look or insert, images or layout options without using a table. I already said no merged or split cells. And so oftentimes you just have to, if this is the way your data is set up initially, you have to either break it into 2 tables or you have to think of another way that you can relay that text. Sometimes it's just a bulleted list. Maybe it doesn't need to be a table that you're presenting the information in. So these requirements have definitely made us start to think how we present our information. So the next really important element or item that we want to discuss, and this is applicable across all digital platforms, but as are many of these principles, is you want to make sure that descriptive link text is used. And so what I mean by that is I have some inaccessible examples here that I'm going to share as I continue to go through and add headers to this as we're working through it. Some inaccessible examples are to learn more, click here. Why is this a problem? Because if somebody is using a screen reader or other assistive technology and they're pulling up a list of just all of the links on your site, what they would see is click here, https://connors.wsu.edu, which that's not so bad. That's kind of self-explanatory of where it's going to go. But sometimes a screen reader will read out, depending on the screen reader, each letter individually of a URL. So it could say https://CAHNRS, and it could read the entire URL out to the user, which is not a good experience if it's a really long URL, especially. So the link should make sense out of context. So click here does not make sense out of context. You don't know where it's going to take you if you haven't read the surrounding text. So a couple of accessible examples, how you would fix something like that is you would say, visit the Connors website for information on how to apply. And information on how to apply is hyperlinked and will take you to the future students page on the Connors site that tells you how to apply to the program. So out of context, this link by itself tells you that it's going to take you to information on how to apply. Same as the next example, which is subscribe to announcements from the Connors web team. This link would make sense out of context. So that would be another proper way to use descriptive link text. Sometimes on a website, you will see buttons used that say learn more, click here, continue reading, things like that. On some of our websites, we can add what's called an ARIA label on the back end to make that link accessible. So if you see that on some of our websites, just know that there are ways that we can still make those links accessible. And if you have questions about that regarding your website, you can just reach out and let us know. The other really important thing, and this is the number one issue that we have on our Connors websites, the number one error is missing alternative text for images. This is problematic because alternative text is what describes the image to someone who can't see it. And if the image is conveying any meaning whatsoever to the user, this applies to charts and graphs and any other type of visual content that conveys meaning. It needs to have descriptive alternative text. And so there are 3 different ways that you can add a descriptive text to your images within your document. You can add the alternative text directly to the image. So if I were to, I'm going to click on this tower image that I have on the page, and I'm going to right click and scroll down. I have several options. I'm going to select View Alt Text. And there is nothing in the dialog box on the right-hand corner. I have a section now where I can add a 1 to 2 detailed sentences about what is in this image. I can try the generate alt text for me option. Sometimes that's a good place to start. And it's just basically using AI to generate a possible selection for you. Although this is false, it doesn't have to say photograph of a red brick cloud. It could just say red brick. So you always want to double check. Red brick clock tower with white accents set against a partly cloudy sky. Autumn foliage with the red and orange leaves frames the tower, highlighting seasonal fall atmosphere. That sounds pretty good. You could add that it's a WSU building if you want. You could make changes. You don't have to have image of or photograph of or graphic of. That is not required. So just make sure AI is great, but it's not always 100% accurate. So I'm going to leave that. If the document had captions instead, so I don't have a caption added to this document, but if I had a caption, say on a website, and I only wanted the caption will satisfy the alt text. So if you accurately describe the image in the caption, you do not have to repeat the same text for the alt text. I still suggest adding alt text, but if you're going to add a caption, just make it different than the alternative text. Otherwise, both are going to get read to the user and it'll be redundant information. The other time that you can choose not to add alternative text is if the information is in the surrounding text. So if you are accurately, say you have an image of a table or a chart, and you are accurately describing exactly what data and information is in that chart or graph in the surrounding text, then you do not have to provide alternative text. What you can say in your alternative text is description provided in surrounding text. That's what you could put for your alternative text for that exact image. So it can get kind of tricky. There are some great resources on the WSU Digital Accessibility website to provide more information on how to accurately do alt text. And then also, if it's just decorative and it's not providing any information to the user and it's not even necessary, you can select mark as decorative for that image. And then a screen reader will ignore the image completely. And so that's how you would do that within Microsoft Word. Okay. Next important issue, not using color alone to convey meaning. Um, Assistive technology cannot infer meaning from color alone. And so I've got some examples that I'm going to go through here. I'm going to add my headers as I go through. So I have some inaccessible examples. I have a bullet point. The first one says, if you proceed, your account will be permanently locked. And the text permanently locked just has a red font applied. That is an example of using color alone. There's no other treatment to that text that differentiates it to the user. In this case, what you would want to do is add an additional identifier. So I have an accessible example right below that that says if you proceed, your account will be permanently locked. Permanently locked is both red and bolded. Or the next bullet point says if you proceed, your account will be permanently locked. Permanently locked is red and italicized. So both the bold and italicized HTML tags will provide information to the user if they're using a screen reader that identifies that text as being different and not just if they have color blindness and they can see, then they'll be able to see the difference in the text. So that's why that's important. One thing to note about Microsoft is the color contrast checker is not always 100%. So it is important to use additional tools at times that will help you determine what the actual color contrast is. I use a tool called Color Contrast Analyzer, and I can provide the link to that for you. But basically, it's just an app that you can download. It's free. You can download it on your computer. It has a little dropper tool where you can check two different colors, which I can demonstrate that here in a little bit, but I have to pull it up on a different, share my screen a little differently. So it will tell you whether or not the color contrast passes the WCAG requirement. So it's a really helpful tool. I've shared in other trainings, and I'll make sure I share that here in a little bit. So moving along, I have some inaccessible examples. Let's see. This is not exactly the right heading order, but I just want to show you at the end how I would generate a table of contents based on a heading structure. So at the very top, I have some light blue text that does not meet the requirement. So I'm going to go back up here to the very top of my document and switch back over to my accessibility assistant. And the very top here, I've got some tips. I want to make that a header 2, which that automatically changes the color. But over here on the right, under color and contrast, I want to show you, once I select that, it's going to highlight exactly where in my document that text contrast is not sufficient. And it's going to provide me with some other options that would meet color contrast. So if I were to select the darker color, then that hard to read text contrast error goes away, and that text is not showing up as an issue now. So make sure that you're using that accessibility assistant. But like I said, it doesn't always catch everything. For example, if I scroll all the way down to the next example I was going to cover, I have a text box, which you don't want to use. I've already said that. I just put this here for an example. This text contrast, I don't think it would pass color contrast. I'm going to check it really quick using my little analyzer tool, which I don't think you can see when I pull it up because I'm just sharing my Word screen here. But when I check that orange color to that black background, it passes regular text. It does pass actually. It fails the regular AAA requirement. So I'll show you what that tool looks like here in a minute because I am almost done kind of going through this list here. And so again, like I talked about in the beginning, the nice thing about using heading structure throughout your document, not just for accessibility, is you can easily generate a table of contents when you're all done. So I'm going to give that a header. I am going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to select insert. I'm going to add a blank page here just so that I can insert my table of contents on the front page. And then I am going, for me on my Mac, it is under References in the Home tab. And then on the far left corner of the ribbon, I have Table of Contents as an option. And when I select that, it gives me all different styles that I can choose from for a table of contents. I'm just going to select the default top one. And just like that, it's going to insert a table of contents for my entire document based on my heading structure that's hyperlinked to the proper content. And this should convert nicely over. This should work when you convert it over as a PDF. So that's the other nice thing too. And so if I were to select that, it drops me to the place in the document where I wanted to go. So, and I don't know why it gave me this extra page here. Maybe I didn't need to insert that. So I'm going to go back and give that my header one. The other thing to keep in mind about this is if you go into your document and you make changes, you will need to update your table of contents if you make any changes to your heading structure in your document. So keep that in mind. I would have this be the last step when you're all done with your document. It's exactly the way you want it to be, and then add your table of contents. It's just a really nice tool to have. So let's say we've done everything that we're supposed to do, which, there are a couple of things that are technically still issues, one of them being merged, tables, cells here that would create an issue in Microsoft or Adobe when you save it as a PDF, but which is identifying in that table section over on the right, use of merged or split cells. But everything else looks to be pretty good. That seems to be the only issue. So how I would want to save this now for formatting, I would want to, so it's different in a PC, and so you follow different instructions. But for me in a Mac, it's File, Save As, and then for underneath File Format, I select PDF, and then it has two different boxes. One is for printing, and then the other is best for electronic distribution and accessibility. That's what I'd want to select. And so,
Yeah, we can't see that, Sarah.
oh, well, it's under File, Save As. Let me just reshare my whole screen, see if that helps. Because then I'm going to show you the color contrast checker as well. That's a really good tool. I'll just share my desktop. Okay, so File, Save As. Now you see it right here in the middle. I'm going to cancel.
Yes, we
File,
could see it.
Save As. And then I'm going to, from the drop down, select PDF. And then the little underneath PDF, you get these two options. Best for electronic distribution. And like I said, for PC users, it's different, but you'll still have best for electronic or accessibility. You'll still have that as an option in your File Save As options. It'll just look different than what I have. And then I would select Export. And then I would take the additional steps, which I'll show you here in a minute, to open that PDF and then run the Adobe checker, because just because you've made it accessible in Microsoft Word does not mean it's going to be completely accessible as a PDF. And we won't go too far into that because we're going to do a training on that next week. But the other thing I wanted to show you was this color contrast analyzer tool, where you can check color contrast. Let me just turn this back to a really light color. Let's just turn it back to, let's just do like a light orange. And so I can't even hardly read that. It's obviously not going to be accessible. And so the background color is white. So I just use a little dropper tool and select the background, and that's white. And the foreground is the text color. So I'm going to select that. And so it's taking these two colors. And then at the bottom of the screen, it gives you the exact WCAG results and tells you that for all areas, for all of those requirements, I am failing. And it's because it's only a 1-to-1 ratio, and the requirement is 4.5 to 1. So this is a great tool that you can have for any project you're working on, whether it's a presentation, web content, document, it doesn't matter. It's a great tool to check your color contrast, because the built-in tools are not always perfect. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and then I am going to pull up that PDF that we just saved.
So Sarah, quick question. So you went to File Save As instead of clicking the Acrobat tab at the top. What would happen if you use the Acrobat tab instead?
That's another way that you can do it. You can do it that way. I think you should have the same options. It's just, like many things, there's more than one way to accomplish. Is this the right one? Yeah. Okay, so I am going to share my screen again and show you the PDF that I saved. Okay, and so now that I'd saved this PDF, it looks like these hyperlinks transitioned over. I am going to run the accessibility checker in Adobe Acrobat. And for me, when I open Acrobat, under All Tools, I have to select View More and then scroll down to Prepare for Accessibility. And then I have to select Check for Accessibility. I leave all of the default report options checked that pops up in the dialog box, and then I select Start Checking. And then over on the right side, I get results under the Accessibility Checker tab, where I can expand each area. And right away, I can see under Document Issues, a document that there are 2 issues. This is always going to be the case. And the reason is you always have to manually check your reading order, which we'll cover next week or next month. And you always have to manually check your color contrast. Those are always going to show up as an issue for you. You'll never be able to get rid of those. It doesn't mean your document fails. If it fails, it would have an error and it would have a red mark showing you that that document was going to fail. But it's showing I'm appropriately nested. I'm using my list items. It is marking that the summary was skipped for the table, but it didn't notice that it didn't identify the merged or split cells in here. But if I look at my tabbing, when I check my reading order, that's where it would be identified. So that's an example of just because it's not where it was identified as an issue in Word, but it's not identifying it as an issue in Adobe. And so that manual check needs to happen as well. So alternative text, past, and so you can flip through those. And I'll just quickly point out the tab feature, and this just tells you, or the tag feature gives you an outline view of the tags that are present in this document. So if you did not apply your heading structure to your Word document before you saved it, none of these header tags would exist. None of these would have been applied. It wouldn't have any tags applied to it. And what makes a PDF accessible is the tag structure. So that's why it's important to do it first in whatever native document. So if you're not using Word, you're using Google Docs, make sure you use the built-in tools there. So that is the extent of what I wanted to share about Word documents. I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for questions. I know that was a lot to cover, but those are the basics for creating accessible documents. Most important thing is to use those built-in tools for building your document. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat here. Send you this Word document. Sure, I would be happy to send this Word document to you because it does have the instructions in it. Let me make it fully accessible, and then anyone that would like for me to send it to them, I'm happy to do that because it does have the built-in instructions. Keep in mind, it's the built instructions for a Mac, the Word version, the Mac version of Word, and not the PC version of Word. So there might be some differences for you. Okay, so next question. I've gotten mixed answers online, but would DOI link be accessible, for example? So I've looked this up for publications. If you are, it depends on what you're doing with the document. So if you are distributing it, for example, there's going to be times if you're printing a document only where you might want to print the entire URL. If this is a citation, then you can follow the proper format that is suggested by whatever for reference material. You can hyperlink the actual link, if that makes sense. So it depends. That's, I think, a special case where if it's like a publication citation where you can provide the hyperlink as opposed to um, hyperlinking the descriptive text. But I do both. That's what I always think is a good practice is hyperlinking the title of, say, for example, the article, and then providing the URL unlinked at the end of the citation.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Yep, you're welcome. How do we add the tool to our computer? So I will give you the link. It's called the Color Contrast Analyzer tool. I think it's available on the WebAIM website. I will pull up my list of resources here and send those links to you in the chat as well. And it looks like that's what I had in the chat. What other questions do you have for me while I'm getting those links ready for you?
Sarah, I was wondering about some of the other boxes. When you were looking at the table, you checked the box for header row. And there were some other little tiny boxes that you could check there that I don't really know what those all mean. I wonder if you could go back to that. And
Yeah, it had like banded rows. So that's if you wanted to have the outline banded rows. You can turn on, do you want to break your table? Um, for accessibility purposes, you just need to make sure that the first one is checked for your header row. But just give me a second as I'm doing this. Oh, I need to send this to everyone. Okay, so that is it. That is one. That's an online color contrast checker that I just put in the chat. That's not the one I was demonstrating that you can download. I'm getting that link for you really quick. Where's my bookmark? Oh, here we go. Well, this one's for a Mac. You don't want that probably. Maybe some of you do. That's not the right one. I was ready. Ah, here we go. Found it. On this page, this is where you can download that tool I was just demonstrating. That you can download it as an app from that website. And then some other, I had another, yes, okay. I was going to share a couple more resources here. Just one second. I should have had this pulled up before we started here. Here is some more information. This link here is about complex images. So that talks a little bit more about how to do alt text for charts and graphs and things like that. And then the other is the link to the digital accessibility website. So this site should be your go-to for all things digital accessibility. We're continuing to add new information, new guides, new tools to this page regularly. There's a group of content creators continuing to add content to this site as it's requested. So please bookmark that site. There's a lot of really useful information on there. So I am going to stop record.
Sarah, that w3.org